we can postulate God for practical reasons, right? So like when I say you think purely or phenomenal, I can make a case that there is such a thing as the noumenal, right, which is something that's beyond phenomenal. For example, if you look at a tree, right, the true nature of the tree is unknowable. I think I mentioned that before. So basically, you are using your five senses to perceive the tree,
Well,
right?
what is noumenal then? Tell us what you
Okay,
mean by noumenal.
so it's a concept by Kant. He actually talks about things that is beyond our five senses. We know it exists, but it's beyond our reach. So when he talks about a tree, right? He says the true nature of the tree is unknowable. Why? Because we use our five senses to perceive the tree. The greenness of the leaves, the brown bark, the roughness of the bark, and the smell,
Yeah.
right? But science tells us that there are other animals, right, like an elephant, a bat, or a bee, who perceive the tree completely differently. So the ontological existence or the true nature of the tree, or what he called it, the tree in itself, is unknowable, right? Because if you imagine when humans and all animals die, like what is the true nature of the tree?
Well,
It's
I'm not sure that it's something that actually exists. So let's see. In philosophy, a noumenon is knowledge posited as an object that exists independently of human sense.
yeah. So
Um,
it's basically
but that's
how
how do we know that such a concept actually exists? That's the piece that
yeah.
puzzling
It's
to
like
me.
we know of something that we don't know, right? Because this concept tells us that okay, we have five senses, and it's like a lens that's stuck to us, right? We can never remove it.
Right.
So what happens if we remove it, right? What happens, even though we know we can't, but what happens, right? Because if we were to remove it, the tree will look completely different, right? Because
Well,
we are,
we can
yeah,
remove it because we have people that don't have one or two senses and things like that. So we have examples of that. But
yeah,
let's
but
do a little bit of a Helen Keller kind of a thing. So if there's a tree and you lose your sight and your sound and your touch, you have essentially no physical awareness of the tree, right?
yes.
Right. I mean, unless you bump into it, but that would be touch. So and then smell, we could take that away too. So how would we know that there is this other thing? I'm puzzled by
Yeah,
that the assertion that there is another thing.
because reality is very different. It's subjective to us, right? But it's completely different from a bat, right? Because they perceive it through ultrasonic wave, and a dog perceive it differently. Bees, like because of their cones in their eyes, perceive it in completely different manner. So yeah, we cannot say that, oh, our reality is the most correct, it's the most objective, right? Because there are other animals that science taught us that there are other animals that perceived it completely differently than us, right? So what is the true nature of the tree? It's unknowable, right? But Kant
Well,
says the true nature.
let's think
Yeah,
about a tree for a second. So independent of a viewer, okay, whether it be a bee or a person or a bat. So the tree has an objective makeup, right? It's in a
yeah,
location. It has a physical build, and now we can put those four things around it. We can put a person, we can put a bee, we can put a bat because they have different ways of perceiving things, and they're all going to perceive the tree in a different way. But that does not change the nature of the tree, right?
no,
Um, and
it does, because we have no idea how the tree wants us, like how is the tree actually being perceived independent of the humans, the bee, the elephant, and all animals
but
around us,
do you
right?
say that
Yeah.
the tree physically changes, objectively changes?
No, the tree could be uh could be a nature that it's like we are in it's like we are in a dark room, right? And there's a big elephant, and all different animals and humans are feeling it in different areas, right? But the totality of the tree is completely different from our perception. It has to be, right? Because
to its small degree, to some degree,
yeah.
yeah. And you can, the elephant analogy makes sort
So
of a various
so
point,
Kant actually
but
says
I'm
it's
but I'm
actually
go ahead.
unknowable because we are limited to our five senses. Like how can we know more, right? Even though we
Well,
know
we're not
more.
limited to our five senses because we can make tools. So there's a lot more senses available to us than we
Yeah.
have.
So just a thought experiment. So let's say all humans and animals were to die today. Like, what is the true nature of the tree in itself? Like, how, or what would it look like, right? It's unknowable, right?
No, why would it be unknowable? I mean, if we gave a set of scientists a bunch of money and said, "We want you to figure out everything about this tree that you can," right? Again, the tree will not change. The tree it just sits there, it is being observed, and we can come up with tools, we can come up with tests, we can sample it, we can diagnose it, we can break it down chemically, we can figure out all these different things using, we can use the senses of the bat, we can put sonar on it, we can use the senses of the bee, we can put infrared and ultraviolet spectrum analysis on it, and we can go way beyond all these different animals. So I'm puzzled that you're, unless I'm misunderstanding you, that you're saying that the tree is somehow going to change based on external perception, or is that not what you're saying?
No, all I'm saying is it's impossible for the humans to know the true nature of the tree. Yeah, we can use many thousands of different tests to test the tree, infrared, any sort of scans that you have, but the tree itself, how does it want the one reality to perceive it in its pure form, right? It's unknowable, right? Because
I don't get the
is it limited to our
unknowable.
five
Why would it
senses,
be
or is it limited
unknowable?
to a thousand of the like thousand different senses, or million different senses, right? What does the tree want the reality to perceive it as? It's completely unknowable. Yeah,
How
I agree
far?
with you that we
How
can.
far?
Yeah,
When we get into something like Kant and things, those people were limited to knowledge of their day too. So realize that. So how far down do you want to get with analyzing this tree? And because we can analyze this thing down to a quantum level at this point in time. So isn't that enough? How absolute? Why do you need this absolute? Um,
yeah.
you know,
I'm just trying to have a thought experiment to let you know that reality in itself is a big subject in philosophy under metaphysics. So it's just saying we can't base. I mean, yeah, I understand that everything is phenomenal, right? Because that's science, right? That's everything that we know. But Kant is actually trying to tell us that reality in itself, the intrinsic reality, is actually something that's metaphysics and it's unknowable by our empirics, because there we know, like, what he's trying to tell us is that we know something that we don't know. Yeah, he's just pointing at things that actually humans know it exists, but it's actually unknowable.
okay, so so
That's what he's trying
let's
to
let's
say.
go with
Yeah.
that a little bit then. Let's go with that a little
Hmm.
bit. So realizing that if we put 1,000 tests, there's always going to be like one more test that we are not aware of. Okay, so we can never at an absolute completely know the tree, but we can get really close to it. So what's left? There's something that's unknown that by definition we do not know the nature of, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what do
We know
you
the nature, but we don't know the true nature. Yeah, what it actually,
well
yeah, what it wants to show us. I
you're
mean,
you're,
show reality
you're
itself.
let's talk if you want to talk in absolutes, we can talk in absolutes. The
Yeah.
the point I'm trying to make, if we can figure out 99% of the makeup of a tree, so there's only 1% left over, what is that 1%? I mean, other than we'll just label it as unknown, and it's the balance that makes up a tree. So Why?
Yeah,
What do you? What
wait,
do
but
you?
the thing is, how would you know it's 99%? It you could
I'm
be,
just grabbing
yeah,
a
you could be
number.
the one.
I'm just
Yeah,
grabbing a number because I
we
mean,
could find like 10,000 tests and it could be still 1%. Yeah, that's
I
my view.
understand, but I'm just grabbing a
Uh-huh.
number. I could grab a
Yeah.
99.999 whatever. I'm just grabbing a number just to say that there's because you're saying it's unknowable because we can never reach 100%, right? So I'm going with your concept. I just used 99 just to grab a number. So the question is, what is that? What is that balance made up of? And the answer would be we don't know, right? So that's usually where, and it's kind of a God of the gaps thing where people throw in transcendental constituents. So
Not really, but all I can say is the objective nature of the tree that we perceive of is not objective. Definitely is not objective, right? Because we are just basically using our only our five senses. Yeah. So by our own perception of the tree, it's definitely not objective. That I can confirm, right? Because as you've said, we can use 10,000 tests, and we can end up with only 1% of the tree
okay,
that we know of,
so
right?
where does
Yeah.
this take you?
I'm just giving an example of something that is beyond phenomenal, a very normal object in life, like a
It's
tree,
not, but
right?
it's not beyond phenomenal. That's what I'm trying
It
to
is.
get
It
to
is
you.
because
That gap, that little gap that's left over, it could actually be phenomenal. We just don't have the right test.
yeah,
The
but
idea that you're saying it's not phenomenal is, I think, your logical error there. I think that's your
yeah,
fallacy.
but I differ from you, right? I don't think it's a small like a small gap, right? I could also say that it's actually only 1%, right? I mean, we never know, right? Yeah, we never know.
Why do you think it's not that the balance is not phenomenal?
Because there exists something, right, in reality that none of the conscious beings, be it humans or animals or insects, right, can perceive fully, right? So there itself tells us that there must be something out there, right, that is objectively, yeah.
I'm
You could
sorry.
say no,
Go
but
ahead
I'm
and
just,
finish your sentence. Go ahead and finish your sentence.
yeah, because the true nature or the tree in itself could be grounded either by God or by something else, right? We never know.
Okay. Okay. Do you
Yeah.
understand what I was saying though? Because there's a balance that we don't know, why can't that just be another piece of natural stuff that we don't have the proper tools to test? Why do you have to go to it has to have a supernatural
No, no,
element
no.
to
It
it?
does not mean that, right? It does not because Kant does not.
Forget Kant. Forget Kant. I'm
Okay, okay.
asking
So
you. I'm asking because what I'm criticizing here is the logic of the concept.
yeah,
So I don't care who it
I
comes from.
understand
I don't care who it comes from.
because I know I can never know because I already said in the beginning I can never use empirics. Like we cannot use empirics to know the ontological existence of God, right? So I didn't say that I know God exists, right? I said I cannot know God exists, but I'm just saying that we can.
We don't know that.
Yeah,
That's a side topic. We don't know that you
correct,
can't
correct.
know the nature of God.
Or more simply put it, we cannot use empirics. We cannot use our five senses to know for sure, right? So
Why?
I'm just saying that I can postulate God for practical reasons, right? So one of the reasons is grounding for noumenal reality, and
That is no more valuable than Plato with his shadows in the caves metaphor. That is no more implying a reality than the cave thing, which is not implying that there is an actual that there are actual things causing the shadows. That's just an as if metaphor.
yeah, but that's just one of the aspect that I can postulate God for, and also I think another thing that's important is also objective morality. Like,
Okay,
do you
hold
think it's
on.
important?
Let's not go there yet because that's a different
Yeah.
subject.
Okay. Sure. We can go back to the noumenal stuff.
Why can what justifies you postulating God? I don't see the justification here.
Yeah, there are many different reasons why. The do you want to talk about the noumenal part first or
Yeah.
something else?
Yeah, no, we're still on the noumenal stuff here.
Yeah, because in reality, every single thing that we see, that we perceive, it is it is it is we now know it's purely subjective, right? So a horse can see it differently, we can see it differently. So our objectivity is actually false, right? We cannot
Whoa,
say
whoa,
what we
whoa, whoa,
perceive.
whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, slow down. Think about this, Hayden. Think about this. If we put 1,000 tests on something and determine all the phenomenological elements to it that we understand, you're turning that into a we don't know that it's
No. I'm not talking
false.
about tests. I'm not talking about tests. I'm talking about naturally, right? Humans naturally we perceive with our five senses.
And
So
our five senses give us more than 50% of the reality of things.
that's an assumption, right? That's
No,
an
it's not
assumption,
an
right? Because
assumption.
it's
Have you
because
ever walked into a tree? It's pretty dang hard. You know,
yes.
That's pretty good information.
Yeah, a tree exists, right? A tree
Yeah, the
exists,
tree exists and
but
it's hard, and you get some pretty decent data there. So
I know, but
this idea that you're jumping to, that we cannot know and we don't know and we don't, we it's like you're suggesting that our five senses only give us some sort of like vague 5% understanding of a reality of a physical thing is just really misguided. Where is that coming from?
no. I'm not talking about. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the our five senses perceiving the tree is is very different from all other living things around us, right? That perceived it. So we cannot say that our five senses are the accurate representation of the tree, right? We cannot say that, right? That's too
Of
naive,
course we
right?
can. Of course we can. Hayden, of course we can.
So
Our
so
five
so
senses, or six senses actually, give us a pretty good understanding of what a tree is. This is what evolution does for us. It's not perfect. We might be colorblind, for example, but of course it gives us a decent,
no,
more realistic than not appreciation
but a
of what
bat
the
would
physical
say
nature of
otherwise,
a
right?
tree is.
Like he
What's
would
that?
say a bat would say otherwise, right? Say, that's not true. Mine is the most objective one because I'm using
A bat, well, first
ultrasonic
off,
waves, right?
a bat would just say the same thing. The bat has
So
sonar and
who's the correct one? Yeah.
Hayden, the bat has sonar instead of light. Okay, it uses
Yeah.
sound instead of light. It's gonna come to the same conclusion. The tree is there. It's hard. It has a texture. If it lands on it, it can use feel and stuff like that. So this whole concept that you're putting out there, that we do not have a good representation based on our senses, is ridiculous. And when I throw in the concept of we can
No.
add
Yeah.
tests, stop saying, oh, no, because you're wrong on this stuff. When we add experimental tests and tools to measure and analyze biochemical and all this other stuff that goes way beyond our senses, we are getting that much more of a representation of what these things are. So I don't see your point. Why are you trying to degrade all this sensory information, whether it be
It's not degrading, right? It's basically telling you. I'm not talking about perception of the tree. I'm talking about the true nature of the tree.
the tree
Right.
does
Like, what
not
is the true nature of
change.
the tree?
Why do you think the tree? Okay, you don't think
No,
the tree.
that's not.
You don't think the tree changes, correct?
It does not change. Yes,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
what is the tree in reality in itself is
Okay.
like, right?
You're
Yeah, I
starting
mean
to go.
it's.
You're starting to go in circles here, Hayden. So
Yeah, I mean maybe you can agree to disagree. Yeah.
No, I don't
I'm
agree to
I'm not trying
disagree
to
if
argue or
you're
anything, right?
because you don't seem to be even understanding what I'm saying.
No, I understand you're saying okay, we have our five senses, and you
Yeah.
think it's accurate, right? The accurate
It's
representation of the
pretty
tree,
good.
and then
Yeah, it's pretty good. Yeah.
and then we can use other tests, right? But all I'm saying is the independent, like for example, if humans and insects die, and all living things die, how is the tree like independently? Yeah.
How is the tree independent?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
How does reality perceive it independently when
Can
humans
you
and animals are not around? Yes.
can okay? I'm not sure I get this question. How does the tree perceive animals around
Itself.
it?
Yeah, independently.
How does a tree perceive itself? A tree does not perceive itself. It only perceives on a chemical basis. It doesn't have other types of neurological systems.
Yeah, I think to put it in a simpler way, like because yeah, it's hard to actually describe it. Like let's say you have a super powerful recorder or some sort of a camera, right, that can perceive like the complete sense in the
Okay.
world, right? Okay,
Okay.
and then it looks at the tree, right? What will it look? What will the tree look like to it, right?
Well,
That is the main
the
problem.
answer to that question is only you can only make the statement that you made it right the sentence before, that this ultimate test gets all
It's,
the information. We don't know what all
yeah,
the
let's
data
say we have
is.
yeah, let's say
So
we have
so
a machine that knows
you and I
everything.
can't say, but we can say that Bill wouldn't stand a chance against Darth Dawkins. Oh my God, that's hilarious. Darth Dawkins is not an honest person, and he's cruel, and that right there. If I think he did come in here once, and I won't give him the time of day. He's
Still,
never
but we
worth
have to
3 seconds
we
of
have to
my life.
be more empathetic, right? I mean, yeah, these
He's
people, they are
not a
also
decent
trying.
person. He seeks out people, and he becomes cruel right off the bat. Is just I don't
Oh,
need
okay.
him in my life, and he shouldn't. I wish people wouldn't interact with him because he doesn't
But I'm
serve
empathetic
a piece
towards
of anybody's time.
atheism and theists because I mean ultimately they're just trying to know or to understand the true nature of reality. Yeah.
The point is, in this tree, okay, you got this test, this super tester thing that can know everything. Conceptually, you have no room to logically justify a God portion of belief. You have absolutely no reason to justify that. You have no reason to justify that there's anything more than a phenomenological thing. Okay, so putting that in there is just not logically viable, and you're missing that concept.
Yeah, but I think we cannot just brush it off and say like, it's not possible. Like, why do you want to say that? It's so cruel, right?
I didn't
But
say it's not
it's just a
possible.
question,
I
right? It's
say
just a
it's.
question.
Oops,
It's like,
hold on. I have a request
mm,
up that I'm seeing.
it's like in reality, the humans and all living animals they perceive the trees differently. But there exists, for example, in a thought experiment, some sort of a sensor that can sense every single phenomenal or any sort of senses in the whole of the universe, right? They will perceive the tree completely differently. So the question lies, right? Why are we limited, right? Why are we epistemically limited, right? Like why are all living things limited in their senses, right? Yeah.
Hold on one sec. Hayden. Two people just requested in. I managed to get
Sure, sure.
Ralph, and I didn't see the second one. That went away. So you guys
I
can let me know
muted
who that is.
I muted Catholic traditionalist because he's just spewing this Darth Dawkins shit.
Okay, fair enough. If whoever that second person was, if they want to come in,
Oh, you mean the tag argument? Yeah. Okay.
yeah, tag is fine. I mean, it's just the Darth Dawkins stuff is. I don't mind Darth Dawkins concepts. I don't mind anybody's debate or argument, but
Yeah, because the things
it's the
about
style that he does. He's a cruel
yeah.
person. I have no interest in having him ever interacting with a person who's dishonest and cruel like that. He's I don't know. It's just he's a
Because the precept is actually talking about something that is also unknowable, right? Because they are talking about logic and math, and these are foundational question. So it has to be virtuously circular, right? Because without that, how can we make any sort of
The
knowledge
presupposition
claims, right?
loses on concept alone. Period. If you have a presupposition, if you come in here with a presupposition, I'm gonna throw you out because you're. I mean, I will talk to you
No,
in
but they are
closet
but
stay
when
state,
they
but
when
having a
they
presupposition gets you absolutely nowhere because you're putting
no
extra cards in the
because
game, basically.
no, it's they are basically mimicking science, because for science to work, right, you need to presup the objectivity of logic and math, right? And
No,
yeah,
you
these
don't.
are
You don't.
preconditions for
No.
knowledge.
Okay, you don't. What we do, we have come to learn that math exists. We have come to learn that logic works. Logic is actually a language put together by people that represents the reality of relationships between things in nature. So we have come to discover that it exists. You don't presuppose it. You
No.
learn
They
of
have to
it.
presuppose that it's reliable and objectively true throughout, right? For science to
Well,
work,
no,
right?
you
So
don't
for
have to
example,
presuppose it. You work with it. If it works, then you keep working with it. So
yeah,
and it seems to keep working. So there's no presupposition involved at all. The
like
only
the
the only
like
limitation we
the
have is the basic laws of physics that we have, which are not presuppositions. They are also just discoveries that we have not found foundational um, reasons for. So doesn't make them a presupposition. It just defines the limits of your knowledge.
It's, it's an
so
explanation of things we can observe. And as long as those explanations hold true and they don't contradict themselves and they're consistent and hold true, those are reliable. That's not a presupposition, that's an observation based on facts. We use language, the language of logic, the language of math, to define how all that works.
Yeah.
yeah, maybe I can explain it even more because what you are mentioning, be it like some sort of a description, right, is basically talking about the semantics and the category of logic. But I think the precepts, they're talking about the underlying framework, right? So for example, if you talk about Pythagoras theorem, right, math, right, which the underlying of math is a logical framework, right? So Pythagoras discovered the theorem, but then even before Pythagoras existed, the theorem existed, right? So for example, a right angle triangle, the sum of a right angle triangle is 180 degrees, right? Yeah, it holds true even before human existed. We
Right.
know it's true because when we look out with our telescope, right, we are basically going back in time. We know that the universe actually behaved logically, right? So
Well, we
and then
know. Let me give
yeah,
you an even simpler one. 1 + 1 = 2. We know this was true even before there were any
yeah.
animals
So
on Earth and humans on Earth, right?
yeah, all the
So
precepts are trying to say is
what does that imply to you?
so humans discovered it, but it is something that is prescriptive. It is there even before human existed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well, we didn't discover it really. We described something that was there. And
so
kind of the same thing, but
That's semantics, Ralph.
it's semantics, but it's not like nothing had to define it beforehand, right?
Yeah.
And that's the precept argument, is that in order for this stuff to exist, there had to be a greater mind, i.e., God, to make this stuff into existence.
Yeah. Which is
And that's not true. That's not required because it can happen naturally. And the result of this natural thing, we see it and we describe it. And that's where our laws, the Pythagorean theorem, come from, is just naturalistic. It comes from that's how it occurred, and now we're describing it. It does not require God.
see the thing is with the precept argument, or one of the precept types of argument, they if they want everything to have a foundation, they say basically that implies that if anything exists, there must have been a creator for the thing, right? So which is just not true. You don't need, things can exist without creation. We know that from quantum physics now. We don't know enough about what caused the universe, about if there are other
So
realms that are outside our
yeah.
laws of physics, to say that because the something exists, there has to be a creator, let alone a sentient creator, let alone a Christian God. I mean, that is
No,
the
but I
most
think yeah.
ridiculous version of it.
But I think that's not the precept argument, right? They are talking about the universe is rationally intelligible. Only an evolved brain can actually know that. And logic and math, which are basically frameworks, right, underneath, they are objective, immutable, and immaterial, right? And then
Well,
any sort of materialist worldview can never account for that.
okay, let's
And these are
simplify this.
actually,
Hayden, let's simplify this
yeah.
and see how this works for you. Let's take the universe back to before the earth. Okay. And let's assume for this thought experiment that there was no life in the universe at that time. So we're going to go back like 5 billion years and whatever. Even you can even go back 3 billion if you want. So let's assume that the universe existed and it was all like gas and rocks and things like that. Okay.
Mhm.
What does that tell us about the nature of the universe to you? And this whole, so there are no perceivers.
Yeah, I can still make a claim that the universe still behaves in a logical manner, right? I still can assume that Fibonacci sequences exist during that time.
Yes.
So it precedes human thinking, right? Because so
Yeah, there's no humans
yeah,
around.
correct.
There are no
So
thinkers of any type. There are no creatures. There's no even bacteria. I'm taking us all the way back.
yeah, so
So
I would assume logic and and the framework of math still exists.
right,
Yeah,
there's no way to do it, but yes, the framework exists. Yes.
yeah. So that's their view, right? Because these are immaterial, immutable, objective.
Well,
Uh,
it does seem to be the case that the universe is consistent. I mean, there's some hypotheses that it's not over long distances, but it does seem to be the case that it is consistent here versus there. 12 light years away. It does seem to be operating in a uniform, consistent manner.
yeah, but so my question is, how would you account for it if if you believe in a purely naturalistic point of view?
If you
Like
don't
these
know,
things are immaterial, right?
if you don't have information, you do not account for it, because accounting for it without a basis is, I don't even know what's the word.
Phil, but you do understand that these are preconditions to epistemic knowledge, right? So your whole life,
Okay,
right, you might not even know how it
we don't
existed.
have epistemics because we have no living creatures.
Oh,
We're
you mean
only
during that time? Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're only talking about the objective realities of the objectiveness of reality at that period of time before there's any perceivers. So there's no epistemology going on at this point. So
Yeah.
so something exists, and that's all. That's the end of the story. If let's put a perceiver in there. Let's put you and I. We'll put our brains together and we'll hold hands. So we're two thinkers now, and we're trying to figure out something about this universe. And we look at it and we see that it exists. All that we know is that it exists. We know it. That doesn't imply anything about how it came to exist. It just tells us that it does exist, which tells us that the existence is possible. Right?
Yes.
Right. So that's all we get. There's no implication of a greater power. There's no explanation for how, because we don't know. So that's analogous to where we are in current day, except that we have more information about the physical than we used to. The rest of it, the philosophy of it, is really just mind games. It's really just it's thought speculation, which is fine as long as you don't take it to a conclusion when the conclusions are not justified. The gut
Yeah,
point the gut point that you really have to get to is when you're in a position of not knowing, you can make no forward steps toward anything being likely. So
yeah, I understand you.
you cannot say that there's a God out there. All you can say is that I can come up with a God concept as a modern thinker,
Yeah, I understand you. Like,
there's no basis for believing in that concept.
Like even with the whole concept, the presupposition stance of, someone had to put all these there had to be a greater mind to put all these laws of logic and math in place and design all these, concepts and stuff that we're not even that we're now defining, right? But that just presupposing that had to be a mind or something to create the laws of nature and stuff only gets to the point that at some point in the past someone designed the universe or something designed the universe into existence, creating these laws. It doesn't even allow, or it does allow, for that person or entity to stop existing at the point that the universe was started. Like theoretically, someone could started the universe, right? An external being to the universe could have started the Big Bang, started everything in motion, set the laws of the universe into existence, and then immediately stopped existing themselves. And we would be where we were today. So no God as we know it. So I mean, it could be a God, it could be this thing, it could be all natural. We just don't know. There's lots of options in the bucket that we could choose from, but we have no evidence leading to any of those conclusions. So we just have to stop with they exist, therefore they are. There's no way to know it's God. It's a temporary being. It was a fart by a unicorn flying past and made our universe, whatever.
So welcome in Wildberry and Phil Red. There definitely is something different going on in TikTok. I've got no requests in for anybody, so I've had to invite people in. I was just gonna have to get into the habit of doing that. But welcome in, both of you.
Hello.
Hi, Phil.
Hi. What have you guys got to add to the conversation here? What sticks out for you?
I heard that you did a breakdown of why precepts don't work.
Yeah. Presupposition is just it's like asking for a 53rd card in a in a card game. It's like you start out with a supposition that X is true, and then you get to use that card where other people don't get to use it. There's no foundation for that piece of information, and so that's false by its on the face of it by definition.
I'm not fully following.
Okay, presupposition is that you assume something to be true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so a standard presupposition would be that either there is a God or that you need that you can't have logic without having a logic giver, a foundation. Logic must have a foundation. These are all presuppositions.
Mm-hmm.
And when you don't have a basis for saying something, you can't make it true just by throwing it into the game and saying it's true. So
Okay.
if we stick with just the pure God question,
Mm-hmm.
is there a God? That's a viable question. We can debate, we can talk, we can think about why we believe, why we don't believe. But a presuppositionalist will just come in and say, point one, God exists. and evade the whole question, and then pretend as if they're allowed to do that logically,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not. It's an unfair. So once you make a presupposition that's not based on anything, you have no, uh, we don't know if that thing is true, right? We can ask the God, does God exist? Yes or no. We don't know. Yes, maybe no. But if someone comes in and says just yes, whatever they say next has at least a 50% chance of being untrue.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just going to just sort of roll right across your logic and pretend that they've got this extra play card that they shouldn't be using.
Right, because they're saying if this is true, then blah 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 blah, but they haven't said why.
But they don't start with if. They just start that with it is true.
Mm.
That's the point. They never say if. They just say it's true.
The other big fallacy I see in it is the assumption, Darth Dawkins does this, is like, well, you can't know anything because you don't have any foundation for it because you don't believe in God. Well, how does belief in a God or gods change what you have evidence for when you have no evidence for the God itself? Right? You have to start any logic or any argument of you need God for a foundation with evidence for that God as the foundation. Like you start math that defining, 1 plus 1 equals 2. There's proofs and theorems for that, but you start with defining stuff in there. You don't presuppose that 1 plus 1 equals 2 when you're trying to prove that. You have to first define that and give evidence for each step through the process.
So when you're talking to someone, when you're listening to what they're saying, it helps to look for things that don't make sense. Are they bringing in extra baggage that they're not justified to bring in? I'll give you a presuppositional question. Here's an interesting one. Why do we exist? Okay. That is not a foundational question. It sounds like a foundational question because we're so familiar with the question, but it's not foundational. The foundational question is there a reason that we exist? Yes or no?
Yes.
Right?
Okay. Yeah.
Now, if you just ask why do we exist, you've already assumed that the answer to the first question is yes. And it indeed may not be. There may not be a reason.
So I'm totally sorry.
Yeah, that's enough. Go ahead.
I'm totally following that. I am actually deconstructing my Christianity, and I'm having regular conversations with my father, who has a PhD in biblical studies and is a pastor. And his contention is that atheists presuppose that there is no God, while he presupposes that there is a God. So why is that incorrect?
Well, there's two ways to define atheism. One is to say that I believe there is no God, and the other is to say that there isn't a God.
Okay.
Okay. To say that there isn't a God, it would be a presupposition. To say that because it's not a foundational thing. Oops, hold on. I gotta do this TikTok thing. Okay. So the proper stance, if you're going to ask, is there a God, is to consider the question. If you do not see enough reason to believe in a God, then you don't believe in the God. Okay?
So
you're not assuming that God doesn't exist. You're just saying, I don't believe it. I don't have enough reasons to believe it to be true.
Sure. Okay.
So I was a Christian for 49, 50 years and have a big family history of it and everything. And it was a big deal for me to deconstruct and whatnot. But the bottom line, once I started deconstructing and realized that the evidence that I thought was good evidence for God existing wasn't really good evidence, and the more I looked into it, the more I realized that, and and now it's not only that, but even if the God of the Bible exists, I wouldn't want to have anything to do with him because I'm realizing how evil he is according to my moral stance. And theists sometimes will claim that atheists have no moral stance or there's no, I don't believe in objective morality. But, and that's a whole nother discussion stuff, but there's several steps. And if you've come across Dan McClellan,
Yes.
all right, he's not atheist, right? He
Right.
is a Mormon. He believes in God and everything. He just doesn't believe the Bible is true and infallible and it is written by man, but he believes God is just, I don't understand all of his beliefs and stuff, but he has some really great stuff on his channel and stuff, and really deconstructing the apologist view of Christianity. But there's some really good stuff out there. If you need some guidance or anything, just reach out and you can message me and stuff, and I can point you to some other places to look at. But yeah, anyways.
Cool. Thanks.
So Phil,
Yeah,
what comes to, what questions do you have? What sort of gnaws at you as you're at this point in time as you're deconstructing? Are there any open questions that are still
Yeah.
confusing to you?
Yeah. What gnaws at me is that I find Jesus pretty winsome, and yet Jesus follows the God of the Hebrew Bible, of the Old Testament.
Yeah. Why do you
So-
think that is?
I don't know.
So Jesus says a lot of really great things, nice things, blessed are the poor and on, right? There's a lot of good stuff in Jesus' teaching, and not believing in God and not believing in theism doesn't make those good things he said untrue, right?
I
There's
agree.
a lot of good stuff in there, and just not believing in God doesn't mean you have to throw out all that good stuff. But if you look at other religious texts, if you look at the Quran, if you look at the Hindu teachings and even Greek teachings of their different gods and stuff, there's a lot of good stuff in there. And I think it's just humans, as our nature, as evolution and stuff has evolved us, our morality and stuff, we have discovered there's good things, and we can look back at those discoveries and writings of people in the past and pick out the good stuff. But with that, if someone is saying this is all true and this is from a higher power or something, you can't pick and choose just the good stuff from it. You have to take the bad stuff too, and that's my block. It's like, sure, he says some good stuff, but there's also some bad stuff in there, and I can't accept it whole scale. So go ahead and pick all the good stuff out of Jesus that you can.
Yeah.
That's great, but draw the line there and say, we're not going to take the bad stuff, which also means if you're not going to take the Bible and everything full scale, I don't see how you can be a Christian, believe in God, and not take all of it.
yeah, but you can be a theist and not believe in the Christian God, right? You can just believe in the more parsimonious God, like the triomni God.
Sure.
Because
Oh, absolutely. You
Yeah,
can believe
because-
in Zeus,
yeah.
you can believe in Thor. Theist is
no,
believing
no.
in any god or a higher power.
The triomni God is basically the greatest conceivable being, right? So it makes sense because it's more parsimonious. So you get the grounding of every single thing that you don't know, and also the objective morality and the eternal justice, right? Because if you don't have eternal justice, it would ultimately lead to some sort of a moral decay. Because
But even
yeah, so when I talk about eternal justice, because we know for a fact that justice in this life is incomplete, right? Because there are many injustice that remains unresolved, like
If there is not justice, that doesn't mean it's incomplete. That assumes that there is a completion of justice.
Or
okay, so
or it
so for
needs to
example,
be, or it needs
for
to
example,
be.
a criminal, right? He goes to some sort of a children hospital and he bombs every single child inside, and then he commit suicide. So there lies something that is in this life
Unjust.
an
Exactly.
incomplete justice,
Unjust.
right? So
But
so
why are
if
you
you were to
assuming that?
postulate some sort of a God that has eternal justice, it actually has some sort of a moral motivation for moral agents to actually do the right thing objectively. And if you were
No, it
to
doesn't. It doesn't. It
if
means
you were to hold
nothing.
a view of
It
pure
means it
atheism,
means
right, it
it
would lead
means
to some
nothing.
sort of a nihilism.
It means
Yeah.
nothing. Sometimes bad people get away with stuff.
Yeah, but
Let me go back to
okay.
what Ralph said for a minute, Philly, because I think this would be useful. So you know about the Jefferson Bible?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So Jefferson took out the supernatural parts of the Bible, and he was a big fan of Jesus and Jesus's good teachings, right?
Hmm.
So, you know, I think it's fairly easy to assume that Jesus was a real person and teached most of what he taught. Um, we can ignore, you can put aside the bad stuff, like you should leave your family and take up a sword and blah blah blah. So if the positive stuff is attractive to you, you can use that in your life. You use it as an ideal of how to live. It
Mm.
does. You don't need the supernatural elements. You can take out all the supernatural elements and still have a very decent teacher, a very
Mm.
kind person, someone you could use as a model, even if this person didn't exist, like maybe Socrates didn't exist.
Right.
So that's fine, and that is valuable. What the important thing to do is to separate that from the idea that the Bible is immutable, because the minute you do that, then you're stuck to accepting, like Ralph said, all the negative stuff and the bad stuff and the untrue stuff, like the
Hmm.
Adam and Eve story and the Noah's Ark story.
The thing is, even when I was strong in faith, I viewed those as myths. They were poetry. They were stories to explain something. They were fables. Even when I was a pastor, because I used to be a pastor.
Yeah, and that was something I did too before I really started deconstructing. Is like, yeah, the creation story isn't literal. It's, you know, just kind of story to explain to the the Israelites where they came from and stuff. It wasn't meant to be literal, but then
So
they took,
poetic, right?
right. It was more poetic or whatever, right? And stuff like that. But then as you get more into it and start looking at other stuff, and it's like, well, you can do that for the some of the historical stories, and maybe even Jesus turned, you know, water into wine and stuff like that. You know, it's more poetic, whatever. But then you get into stuff where there's law giving, where you need to do this, and this stuff is obviously not a poetic story. This is, you know, slavery, not wearing mixed cloths, cutting your hair, keeping your head covered, women, you know, obeying their husbands or whatever. There's different, you know, apologetics on all of those about how they apply, don't apply, not eating shellfish and stuff, and you know, the list goes on and on. That stuff is not, you know, poetic. And then there's the
That it was
poetic stories.
nation building, right?
Yeah. And then there's the poetic stories that don't make sense in any moral sense for either being a story or not. Like the the kids who were assaulted by some bears because they made fun of a prophet's beard, I think it was, or something.
His bald head.
His bald head. And you know, it's just like, well, what is, I mean, that's not descriptive of like trying to explain your origins, because that's something humans have always been questioning, is like, where did we come from? You know, what's the answer to that? And for an early people without any science or stuff to try to come up with an explanation, that seems reasonable to me. But even now we still question that because we still can only see back so far. And beyond that is just we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to accept. It's really hard for people to accept the answer of I don't know.
So Ralph, are you an atheist?
Yes.
So Ralph and Phil, you're both atheist. Why atheist and not agnostic?
Well, I'm agnostic atheist, so up top
Okay.
there it says, because it just is a
Oh
recognition
yeah.
that I can't at an absolute honest level know that a God doesn't exist. There seems to be plenty of reasons to believe that one does not exist. And one of the strongest ones to me is the fact that every human culture has come up with a religion and a creation story. And of course, you know that those are all untrue, at the very least, all but one, right? Or possibly all untrue.
Sure.
Those are your two options.
Yeah.
We know that there has been a progression in science in terms of understanding how things work over the centuries, particularly over the last 150 years, to explain much of what we thought that used to be supernatural.
Mm.
So we've never get explanations that are true in religion that science then, doesn't. That science figures out the answers and religion just sits still and tries to reinterpret old words that supposedly you're not supposed to change.
Yeah.
You mentioned
Yeah.
Socrates earlier.
Say again.
You mentioned Socrates earlier.
Yes.
I think he's the one who
Go ahead.
didn't he make the quote that the only thing that I know is that I don't know anything, and I'm not even sure that I know that.
Yeah, it was an honest position.
It is. That's the most honest that anyone can be. Like you can't be more humble than that.
Yeah. Having said that, in the 21st century, that's less true because we know so much more. You're constantly, I don't know if you'll listen to these types of lies very often, but you constantly see theists trying to bash down atheists in terms of, oh, you can't know this, you can't know that, as if these same things don't apply to themselves.
When I look back in history, we have known many things that we later found out that we were incorrect on. Mm-hmm. And even physics is constantly changing, and evolving.
But physics doesn't, things like gravity and things like Newtonian physics and Einsteinian physics, they will never be wrong. They will be refined, and they will be the discovery of new elements in terms of new places that gravity has an effect. In the inside of a black hole, for example, is different than the outside of a black hole. We have a limited understanding of that. At some point into the future, we will understand of that. We will understand that better. However, none of that makes Newtonian physics incorrect, which is
Einsteinian physics explains what is happening, but it doesn't explain why. And I think the why is what everyone is looking for. What is gravity?
Well, you got to be careful with that why question because, again, it's a misnomer. You really should be asking how. But
I feel like perhaps I have a theory.
What's that?
And I'm not a physicist or even real great at math. I can help out with some algebra homework,
I don't think I could do that anymore. Let's go back and studying. Go ahead.
But so the fabric of space time, if it's a fabric, it must consist of something. So say there's a trillion neutrinos passing through each one of our bodies every second, right? And there's a number, I forget, 20 something known particles that are flying around in space.
Yeah.
at near the speed of light. Well, if you look at what a photon does when it enters a medium like water or glass, it deflects, and it deflects because it actually loses just a little bit of energy. And if there is, the number is just ridiculous that is passing through just the earth every second, right? If every one of those particles loses just a little bit of energy, that adds up to quite a bit, which still is going to seem kind of weak, like gravity. Say if you had an oil and water mixture in a jar and you just shook it up,
Yeah.
all those oil bubbles are going to slowly gravitate toward one another. Is that gravity or is that surface tension?
I think that's
Well, it's surface
surface tension and separation
Yeah.
by density.
Well, it's a yeah. So that is exactly my theory. Is what is happening now. We have a separation with not supposed non-interactive particles, and then matter. We're literally in an ocean of particles, and those particles are deflecting from every angle in all directions, and that I feel like that is the fabric, is all of those particles. They're everywhere.
Well, we know there's no. There's
Well, I think
you're getting really close to the ether concept in space, which the idea back with ether was that Paul on YouTube says this is gibberish. I'm not sure if he's referring to what I was saying or what the other guy was saying. Because that's a while back. We know ether was proposed to be the medium that matter passes through, because we know that sound waves are waves passing through particles, right? Like water or air. So the idea that that light had to travel through a medium, since light was partially a wave, there had to be a thing that the ether was, and they found out that there is no ether, which is interesting. So we're not I don't think any of us here are going to be able to really explain space time.
Yeah.
No,
I mean, a lot of what you're getting into sounds like it's getting
I
into
feel like I understand
the
space-time.
string theory, and even subatomic particle level stuff that is stuff we're not quite at the ability to really observe and measure. We're just touching on that realm of stuff, and it might be, at some point we get down to maybe there's a subatomic level thing, and and that has all these other properties and stuff, but we're just not there yet, and it just comes to, we don't know. There could be something there, but we have no evidence of it.
Yeah, I see a comment that says surface tension and gravity are different, and I would agree, because I would say that gravity works similarly to surface tension, but it's not because of the same principles.
Well, surface tension is a more local phenomenon, right? The surface tension is going to be related to the attraction between particles.
Yeah, the oil's not, the water's not flying through the oil. They stay separate, and there's but we have a different phenomenon where we're in an ocean of particles that are flying through, that do lose energy. And if all of those are losing energy, then that means they're pushing on the earth just a little bit in every direction. So of course the earth is going to be a ball, and everything else.
No,
because
the earth
like
is a
oil
ball
and water.
because of the angular momentum. It rotates, and it's a stable structure that minimizes forces in all directions. But you're right.
And grab
If things pass through the earth, you can have some
Angular momentum
some
assumes
interaction,
only matter.
but it's so trivial that it's not going to really affect it of any significance, right? It's not like our orbit is going to be pushed out of orbit by the collective force of neutrinos over billions of years. So the effect is so small that it would be longer than the life of the planet to have any noticeable effect.
Do neutrinos? I see a comment from Diana. She knows some things. Do neutrinos deflect, or do they fly straight through Earth?
Let me look that up. Diane, do you want to come in? Do you know?
If they deflect, then a
question.
force is given, just like light can solar cell.
Yeah.
My knowledge, they don't deflect; they go straight through. If given a right, I think it's like a water volume and stuff, we can see evidence of neutrinos passing through because of energy they pass off when they randomly interact with something. I think the hydrogen or something in the water, something. So we can see some energy, but they don't deflect. They still continue on in the same direction.
Okay, neutrinos do have mass, tiny bit.
Yeah. And they do occasionally interact with matter.
Let me
yeah.
check that. Do neutrinos interact with other matters? Yes, but only very weakly. Neutrinos interact with other matter primarily through the weak nuclear force, meaning they rarely interact with anything and can pass through most materials. So if they interact with the weak nuclear force, they're going to have to get so close. I mean, they are going to literally have to like approach and get within the size of a nucleus to, and the size of a nucleus compared to the size of the atom is just like a football field compared to a tennis ball or something.
And a neutrino is one of, I don't know how many there are. I feel like I remember there being 20 some.
Roughly, yeah.
Subatomic particles.
Yeah.
Neutrinos have no electric charge, so they do not interact with matter via the electromagnetic force, but they do interact
perhaps the weak force
via the weak force.
Yes, and that I feel like for every pass of a neutrino through matter, there's an exchange of information through the weak force.
Assuming that it hits something, which most of the time they don't. Right?
Agreed. Yes.
Most of the time. I mean, we put up these neutrino detectors, and trillions of neutrinos will go through the detectors undetected because they don't hit anything. So it takes like 10 years to. It's like every year they'll detect maybe 3 interactions, and then they have to rule out that it wasn't something else. So the interactions are they do happen, but it's extremely rare.
And gravity's very weak. Like I'm just barely laying here right now. Gravity's really weak.
It's weak compared to what, though? I mean, weak is a comparison statement.
I would say all other forces, right?
Well, gravity is a weird one because it's fairly weak, but it works over all distance, right? Because it decreases with the square of the distance. So, but it doesn't change. Whereas, like something like the nuclear force only works on the scale of, like, 2 protons being next to each other, kind of a thing.
What do you get when you take the gravitational constant divided by the speed of light?
I have no idea.
The gravitational constant divided by the speed of light.
I have no idea.
The gravitational constant divided by the speed of light.
We've got a feedback thing happening there.
She just muted herself. Oh, she dropped.
Oh,
I ask this because if you look at surface tension as an example, it's force over length. So if you try to think, if Earth is inside of an ocean, we're inside a, space has a viscosity, I believe, and that viscosity changes depending on where you are in the universe and how much stuff there is.
It doesn't
So
have enough to be significant because the density of space is something like 1 hydrogen atom per cubic
cubic meter.
meter or
Yeah.
centimeter, something like that. So that is not enough to do anything. And
Yeah, you're right. But that's assuming that everywhere in the universe has that same density. And I'm saying if you take the gravitational constant divided by the speed of light, you get some number. Okay, and that number is going to represent gravity. It's hard for me to explain. Like, it represents gravity traveling.
But what's the point of all this? Like, none of us are, that I know of, are really physicists, and there's like physicist studies into all this stuff, and like some of this, what you're talking about, is like theoretical physics discussions and stuff, which we're not really experts in any regards.
I went down in
Are
gravity.
you trying to get to a point with this line of thinking or something, or what?
Well, no, got sidetracked because it's something I'm interested in.
Yeah. There are some other guys on TikTok who are physicists. I can't remember their names right now.
yeah, Dr. Blitz. Dr. Blitz.
Dr. Blitz,
I do have
yeah.
a comment about the subject, which is another thought experiment of whether there's a God or not. And that is, and it takes some imagination, and maybe I'm crazy, but we can all learn something from it, even if it is ignorant. But two infinitesimal points cannot exist in the same spot. Like, we know that.
That's kind of definitional. That space has dimension.
Yes.
So okay.
2 points cannot exist in the same exact infinitesimal spot.
Right.
No matter how
that
far
goes
you...
against the definition of a point.
Yeah.
Point is just one spot.
Well, if you, for a thought experiment, if you change the definition of what a point is, because the opposite of infinitesimal is infinite, I can, let's say if I picture a grain of sand and just an infinite sea of points inside that grain of sand. Now, and then picture every point being 4 inches wide. Every point overlaps and touches.
No. Because again, definitionally, a point is an infinitely small location. On an XYZ grid, it is defined by specific numbers of X and Y and Z. It can,
But
if any of those variables are different, it's a different point. So there is no...
With a thought experiment, you have to kind of drop everything that you already know and just entertain the idea.
When you're doing thought experiments, you don't drop logic and math.
You do if you're introducing a new logic.
Then you're going to have a hard time getting any of us to follow what you're doing. Because, if you're going to introduce a new logic, which is essentially making something up, I don't know how you can come to any sort of conclusions based on that. An interesting question on YouTube. What do you think happened at Zaytun? I'm going to look that up. I don't know what that is.
Hey.
So
So what are you trying to get to, though? I'm still confused.
I guess if I picture infinitesimal points in reverse, or even, at some point, because they're always getting smaller and smaller. But if you don't picture a point as being its center of mass, but if you picture a point as being an object, that's not even the right word.
What about an asymptote?
Then there's if every single point was infinite, then everything overlaps, and distance doesn't exist.
Sure. I mean, what's the point?
That's the natural. That's the.
I'm not sure where you're
that's
trying to
the
go with this
natural
either.
reaction.
I don't see a logic to what you're doing. You trying to
I
get
just
to a
joined. I'm willing to
conclusion,
listen.
or with this thought experiment
My conclusion from that
or
is that
implication?
it's the strongest evidence that anyone has that there's a God, that distance is required for us to understand anything, but it's an illusion.
Oh, I get what he's saying. Everything exists in relative to one another. So without something to relate to in a physical space or in a time space, you can't. I mean, I don't see how that explains why God exists, but it
Yeah.
does.
Well, if
unify,
distance exists
the
only in the
universe.
conceptual realm, then
It does. It's a unifying principle, but it doesn't seem to prove God to me.
It seems to me that you're just defining the existence of space. You're defining the existence of 3 dimensions. That does not imply anything more than that those 3 dimensions exist.
We
Doesn't
could talk
imply
about
a
how
maker,
the
doesn't
theory of
imply a source.
actually, I
relativity.
think it proves that there's actually no dimensions to space, and that's why distance only exists in the conceptual realm.
But that's only if you follow your thought experiment of saying that there is no space, right? So yeah, if your thought experiment is there is no space and everything is just kind of all touching each other or sort of whatever it was you're saying, then yeah, but you're drawing a conclusion based on false premise.
Not a conclusion, but perhaps a theory that how does quantum entanglement work?
Yeah, you're
No,
going to have to
no.
take this one to Dr. Blitz and see what he says and then bring it back.
Can I talk
Because
about
I'm
it?
not sure you have a coherent concept here.
Thanks
To be
for.
honest. But I know if it is a coherent physics concept, we're not.
I do
getting
understand
there.
what it sounds like, and it's really hard to picture.
Yeah.
But maybe sleep on it and give it a try. Good night, everyone.
All right. Take care. You
I
know,
just
there's
wanted to say
just only
hi.
so much we can do sometimes.
I think
Yeah.
it's really interesting how time and space are both relative. So something that exists, you can self-reference and say, here's a single point, and something exists in reference to that point. And that is not only true spatially, but in time as well. And that makes sense to me in a way where, if you're moving away from something at the speed of light, then what is it? Time for it will freeze, right? In a sense, like your time in reference to it. But what's interesting about that is that didn't make sense to me until I recognized that there is no global time scale amongst the whole universe. Time is only relative, meaning time only exists as a relativization between 2 objects. And so there not being a global time scale like across the whole universe, but just as a relative between 2 existing objects makes a lot more sense to me.
That is still a hard
would have
concept
to
for my
picture
brain.
it without a global time scale behind that at all.
But you're right.
Does that make sense?
It does, because there's you can't say that things do not happen simultaneously. like here and a million
Right.
light years away. It's only relative measurements. And I find it very peculiar still. This is the limitations of my brain. That to think that a
So
photon
it's not like
does not experience time and yet it travels.
that too. That too, I remember that as a fact that I would learn that photons don't experience time as they travel. So it makes sense in a way how like the light from the distance from, all the way, wherever they're traveling from is older light. But then it's kind of confusing though, because that only proves that it's relative, because you would think that, oh, if that light's older, then that would have happened ages and ages ago. But no, that light doesn't experience time. So technically, that is like relative to you. That is exactly the stage of the universe that object you are receiving light from is at,
Yeah.
relative to you.
I mean, for us, the light
It's not.
ages, the photon ages from our perspective and
Right.
and everything. But for the perspective of the photon itself, it from the moment it left the distant star till it got here was zero time.
Right.
And
I
that
think I
has
messed
to
up a
do with
little
the
bit
speed
there.
of light and energy and mass and how all that relates, but it's the occurrence of time itself is all relative to the observer.
Yeah, and what's weird though is that that is apparent to me now that time and space are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah,
Um,
it's all one thing.
And gravity too, right?
Gravity, yeah,
Gravity and time are essentially the same
they
phenomenon
seem
from different perspectives.
gravity almost seems just kind of like intersectional, like it's kind of like emergent effect of something of mass interacting with. I don't know. I think I'm starting to lose it a little bit here and not actually stay on the rails of the why, but like
Yeah.
it makes sense in a way, gravity, but
I'm just glad that it makes sense to somebody because
yeah.
to me, this is like calculus. Calculus was my brick wall, and
Yeah.
relativity is also another one of my brick walls. As many times as I've listened to it, and I was listening to a Veritasium video, and he does amazing work. That guy on
So
YouTube, but
I'm not trying to like interrupt you, makes about me. I I'm 22. I've never like done any kind of like recreational drugs up until this point in my life, and I did recently, and I'm really scientific, like a lot like science and philosophy, and a lot of it made a lot more sense to me after that. But
unfortunately,
I'm
we're not
trying to
allowed
stay
to talk
grounded.
about that on TikTok, so I have to hold you back on that.
Gotcha.
So
No, you're good. I won't talk about that anymore.
yeah,
But you have to kick me. I
yeah.
understand.
Sorry, it's one of those things.
But on that note, that's why it's really good to get outside your box and listen to other stuff and stuff that's not in your box and realm. And it's one of the things I do. Like, I'm an atheist and I'm on this Atheist Live, and you're like, oh, well, you're in your box and stuff. Well, I also spend a lot of time going to stuff, and I try to like target stuff that's completely outside of my box to broaden my horizons and stuff.
Yeah, it does help. It does help, and you know, when you're looking, I don't remember logical arguments. But I follow them and I follow along, and I see where things are going wrong, and I work on it that way. Um, but it does help to have new information. Thought problems are really cool too, but they're so prone to logical fallacy that you have to take them very slowly and very carefully and look out for assumptions that you're making or missing.
No, I 100% agree with you on that. That's something
Yeah.
that I feel like I become very prone to when thinking about these things. So I'm trying to make sure they still make sense, and that I'm not making any kind of generalization, just like you're saying.
Yeah.
I
Well,
agree
I
with
mean,
that.
presenting them to the other people is the great part about it, right? Because it's like the peer review process. This is one of the thing about philosophy that when people come and say that there's something specifically specifically proves something, you'll end up with three different opinions on any pretty much any philosophical point. So, this consensus in philosophy is pretty damn rare.
I see that. What I
Yeah.
find most interesting is drawing potential connections between philosophical standpoints, and like basically just physics, like how things work in nature.
Yeah. I like the idea that we use philosophy when we're stuck, right? Because when like for like in the beginning of the universe, we can sit there and just sort of drop the rules for a moment and go, what if? What if this thing was true? And just kind of make something up. I mean,
Like a
obviously
white
you can
hole
do
versus a black hole.
implications from math and stuff, but sometimes we're really stuck. And that's when philosophy comes on. What if this was true? And then see what that implies. But it's like a math problem in the same way. You have to be doing proper math. You have to be using proper logic. Otherwise,
Can I
it's not predictive of anything at all.
can I point one thing out that one connection I like to make between math and philosophy
Yeah.
is philosophy is kind of like the imaginary numbers in math. They're not real until you know until you complete the equation, but they do have a function. Like they can be used in math and have a complete system, but you have to have an equal sign and fully multiply an imaginary number by another one before it becomes real again. So it's like you have to compare two philosophical standpoints or compare two laws of nature that are inherently contradictory. They both operate contradictory, but when compared, they actually are realizable, kind of like the particle wave duality and like photons.
Yeah.
Both it's it's deterministic and chaotic at the same time, or spontaneous, I should say.
That is the freakiest thing ever. Because up to then, humans, we either didn't know stuff or when we figured it out, it made sense. and here comes the double slit experiment and told us that two things are true at once, and they proved it over and over again. And we're stuck in this whole different reality that we have yet to comprehend fully. So it'd be
It-
interesting to just jump ahead 1,000 years and read a physics textbook at that point and see
yeah,
Yeah,
what they understood.
I think there's still a lot of stuff out there that we don't know, we don't comprehend, or we haven't even um, hypothesized. Like I think there's stuff out there maybe in the extra solar system realm, that the area between solar systems or between galaxies, that there might be something out there that we can't observe through our light observations and CMR and stuff like that, that might exist and explain things better than what we know now. But we're not going to be able to know that until we get out there to actually observe something locally.
Yeah. And I'll
And
throw another option out there too. I think there's quite a possibility that, I mean, perhaps with dark matter and types of things like that, we'll find some new things to learn. But if we went 4 light years away to a star in a solar system and moons and things like that in that location, I think it would ultimately end up to be just as mundane as they are here.
yeah,
You know, because the formation of solar systems all makes sense, how they're formed, and the makeup of them seems to be rather consistent. We just got an asteroid back. We just got a samples back from an asteroid like 2 weeks ago. We got the analysis of what came back, and so this is an asteroid that's been out there since the beginning of the formation of our universe, of our solar system. And what did they find? Amino acid and DNA nucleotides. you know
really.
it's just something that comes to be
I think it
according
was
to,
RNA, not DNA, right?
I think it was both. They said they found five nucleotides.
Oh shit.
which
Anyways,
would I think give you both sets.
That sounds revolutionary.
Yeah, it just to me it implies that the formation of those things from base atoms is just naturally occurs as part of our laws of physics. You probably
Yeah.
need the right conditions to put it together. It also implies perhaps that life on Earth, life in our solar system, did not originate at Earth. On Earth, it may have originated on Mars. Given that,
or from some other solar system, and we caught a stray asteroid right at the right time, and
yeah, well, that's a little
boom.
less likely because that's a little tougher to happen. But they said there was evidence of forming in a saltwater environment, and in the early years of the solar system, Mars would have been the water covered planet. So before it lost its atmosphere. So
Just saying theoretically, if people were to explore Mars enough, that if that's the case, that there might actually be evidence of life.
yeah,
Just
or at
not
least
seeing it.
fossilized bacterial life.
Yeah.
I would expect to see fossilized bacterial life.
Would fall in line with the methane.
Mhm.
Right. Yeah, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
The biggest thing that just still boggles my brain when I think about it is the fact that the amount that we've explored our solar system, the galaxy, the universe as a whole, but really just even if you look at our galaxy, right, and the solar systems that are within it, the amount we've explored that, and for us to say that there's not other life out there would be the equivalent of going to the ocean with a teaspoon and getting a teaspoon of water from the ocean and saying there's no fish in the ocean.
Yeah. I think
That's
it's interesting.
That's a great analogy. Yeah.
I think it's interesting how deterministic and chaotic processes both happen, are both exist at the same time in our universe. So atoms that can spontaneously, what is it? What's the when a spontaneous reaction occurs? Obviously they can predict. They have a probability wave, curve, like a bell curve for when it'll do.
Radioactive
But
decay.
Yeah. But for every individual particle, no person can ever tell exactly when an individual particle will decay. But there's an emergent effect where if you have a certain number of them, they'll have like a half-life.
Right.
And so that half-life is an emergent effect, whereas on an individual particle level, you can actually never predict when it'll decay exactly. It just has a probability, and so that probability is the emergent effect. And so what's interesting is on a macroscopic scale, we go to from quantum physics to traditional physics, and physics are more deterministic. All those probabilities, because there's so many particles, they average out, and so everything kind of falls in line in the center of that bell curve, because it averages out. And so I think that there's like an unexplored area in physics, and that is emergent effects. I think emergent effects are inherent in physics, and I think that dark matter might just be an emergent effect of gravity. That gravity at smaller scales works the way we see it, and at larger scales maybe it makes things push away, and we just can't prove that because we can't go, far away and then see that larger scale because of our perspective. It might just be in another emergent effect that happens at a different scale. I think there's a lot of places where emergent effects are possible and just have not been verified yet, or maybe they can't be verified, which kind of makes this purely speculative, but it would do a lot of explaining of things like consciousness and dark matter.
I don't know much about emergent effect. That would be a very interesting book to read. I've read a book about cause and effect that was very mind-opening, even though I can't remember it now because it was a little over my head too.
But I mean, at some scale, it is real. Like emergent effects, at least in one scale, are real because of determinism to probability from quantum physics to traditional physics. But to say that it transcends that is speculative, but I'm sure that it's possible.
Well,
Like-
you can use the same concept as half-lives and not knowing an individual atom state is you can relate that even to our human lives. Like you can say the average lifespan of humans is 76 years, but you take any individual person, they could pass on at 2 years old or 120, but just knowing that average lifespan doesn't really tell you anything for an individual.
But
And
that's
same
what's
thing
interesting.
for
though, is not
half-lives.
all particles, all those particles look like the same. Like all electrons look identical, though. But if you have a particle that all looks identical, but they all decay randomly, that's what's weird. Humans are all different. I mean, I like the analogy, but what's different between those two is the fact that all the particles are the same, at least apparently.
Well, it's because of their interactions with other stuff and how that impacts their bonds and the nuclear force.
Is an electron foundational?
I don't know actually. I mean, that I heard about the theory that there's only one electron because all of them are identical, but I don't know what that means.
It is considered foundational.
Oh,
Right, but they're not, you take two atoms, they're not exactly the same. There's realms of probability of, like just where we say the electron shells and stuff, that's a range of probabilities of where the electrons are. But you can take
Doesn't matter.
two atoms and they're not going to be identical because there's different probabilities where those electrons and everything exist within that atom. So they're still not identical.
But the electrons themselves, though, those are right.
You're getting into subatomic and like where they're made of and stuff like that. I'm not sure, but
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're not made of anything smaller that we know of. That they are, but there's a quantum probability element to their existence. That we can never say electron is right there.
right.
Right,
But
neither
my
does
point is
Clouds.
there's differences and thus randomness in that, and that's why that's part of why one might decay and another not, because of where they actually are versus where they probably are or whatever. They are actually somewhere, but yeah, it's there's randomness in there, and we just don't know what that is.
And electrons, generally, the nature that they don't sit there by themselves, right? They're in the midst of something else. They're
I guess that's true.
captured.
They
They're
are
in
constantly
the
interacting with
shell
something.
location. They has a certain amount of energy to them, depending on the shell that they're in and stuff like that.
I didn't think about
Anyways, well, guys, I think I'm gonna wrap it. This has been a good night. Let's just call it that.
that. Thanks for
Got to the point we need to bring Dr. Phil in.
have a nice night.
Yeah, Dr. Phil, not Dr. Phil.
It was nice talking with you.
I mean,
Dr. Blitz. Dr.
Blitz.
Yeah.
Blitz. Yeah.
All right. Take care, Gabe.
Hey, one thing, Phil.
Yeah.
This goes back to way earlier what you're talking about. If you're thinking about what to do with your body later on, it's just you look into universities and stuff near you. A lot of them are looking for body donations and stuff like that. So that's another avenue where your body could be put to good use after you pass on.
I'll think about it. I'm still, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. I never thought about that, to be honest. So I'll give it some thought.
Yeah, I have mine donation cards in my wallet for donating to the Texas A&M University system when I go on, and
Well, that's cool.
but
Yeah.
just so it does something. I've always found cemeteries and stuff kind of pointless. Even when I was a Christian, I was just like, I never understood that. And going back because I had some relatives and stuff who'd go back to grave sites and stuff, and like the person's not there. But some people have that attachment or something that it's good for them, but I just never understood it myself personally.
Yeah, at some point I need to ask my kids if they have any opinion. I mean, I honestly, it doesn't mean anything to me personally. I don't care what happens in a sense. And I don't want to take up space, you know.
Yeah.
That's sort of a egotistical thing to do. So for sure, I don't want anything major.
But that's just something to think about, maybe look into. There's probably something with universities and stuff near you that are
Yeah.
looking like there's different programs. There's medical stuff. There's also forensic science stuff where they need corpses to be able to put out in a field or do different stuff with whatever.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, there's that place that's in like Arkansas or someplace where they learn how bodies degrade over time.
Yeah,
But
but
a lot of
there's lots of different science avenues and stuff that need bodies.
and of course there's always Soylent Green, right? So
Yeah.
Google
Right.
it, people. All right.
Yeah. You have a good night.
All right. Take care, everybody. Be kind to each other. See you next time.
See ya.